Welcome back to the Sully Scoop, where three lifelong Husker bros dive in depth on all surrounding the new era of Husker football, where our cups never run dry of the Rule-Aid under head coach Matt Rule. Made by fans for fans with J-Saul, B-Saul, and T-Saul. We are back here on the Sully Scoop. You're here with J-Saul, B-Saul, and T-Saul, and joining us this week to go through the season prediction, how he sees the Huskers rolling, is Big Dog. Welcome in here, Big Dog.
Thanks. Glad to be back. Looking forward to another big year from the Huskers. Hopefully they right the ship this year and go bowling and contend for that Big Ten championship. Maybe make the playoffs.
I don't
Totally
know.
with you there, Big Dog.
Back and big again. I don't know where you have been for the Huskers these past few years there, Big Dog.
Oh, it's a whole new season. I think they had a good first year under Rule. Now he's got I think he's got things ready to tee up and roll.
Jay, so you got to remember, Big Dog only remembers the victories. He doesn't let the losses stick around too long in his memory there.
Well, then he's probably missing a couple years of Husker football, period.
It's still 2014 in Big Dog's eyes.
That's right.
But let's start it off then, Big Dog. We're going to get your season prediction here. So what do you see happening week 1 against UTEP?
No, I see a big Husker win. I think it's just the first of many to come. I don't think UTEP will be able to hang with them, and it'll be good to get any jitters out of the way in week 1. And assuming Dylan Raiola will be the starter, but if not, he'll get, I'm sure, significant time and kind of get the kinks knocked out of it. Hopefully the defense comes this year improved even more from last year.
Now, the $1 million question here. Everybody across the board that we've had on has picked this UTEP game as a win. Do you think the Huskers hold UTEP to under 10 points and get the stadium runzas?
Oh, that's a good question. Now I kind of wish we'd have been picked to go to that game because I think they will be getting runzas. I do think they will hold them under the 10.
I think
Yes,
there's no doubt in my mind. No doubt in my mind this defense is going to hold them under 10. This was a top 15 defense in the country last year, and we're all expecting them to get better. They have all their top players returning.
Hold on, T-Saul, because a couple of years ago, you were coming off that best 3-9 team ever, and we gave up, like 72 points to Georgia Southern?
This is completely different here, B-Saul. That best 3-9 squad didn't have the defense we had this past year.
That defense was top 10 also.
No, they weren't.
Yes,
But
they
Maybe
were.
top 10 in the Big Ten, which is not saying much because there was only 14 teams.
They were a top 10 team in the nation on defense the year they went 3-9.
J-Saul, no, they weren't.
Yes, they were. B-So, pull up these stats for me here. And in the meantime, while he's pulling these
a top 10 defense and giving up games and losing.
Irregardless, UTEP, I mean, Georgia Southern was a decent team that year. UTEP's not that good.
Well, Big Dog, I do want to point out you're saying that if Dylan Raiola starts game 1, if Dylan Raiola does not start game 1, I believe Matt Rule's head will be on some pitchforks going into the stadium. This is the #1 recruit we have gotten in the history of Nebraska. This guy has to be starting week 1. This could be the first win Nebraska gets opening a season in 5 years. Sorry, 6 years. And every game that Nebraska has opened up for the past 6 years has been against a been against a Power 5 school. This is the first non-Power 5 school they will be taking on to open the season. And I think this is really what they need, a tune-up game for a starting freshman QB.
Yeah,
Now,
I don't think he has to start. I think he could go off the bench. They could guide him in easy. I think he probably will start. I don't think it's a requirement because I think whoever goes in, I'm expecting this to be a blowout, and they're not going to be playing the whole game anyway. I think the
Now, the
backups
other
get
thing-
just as much time.
Now,
You guys
big
gotta
dog, if
remember-
it's up to me, he's playing the whole game. I mean, this team hasn't earned benching a player because we're up by enough, because up by enough in previous years has been an L by the end of the fourth quarter. So guess what? He's playing the whole game. And, until it's time to take a knee, we could send his subs in there, but he's playing the whole game. I want 100 points. I want a big victory.
That is the biggest mistake that Scott Frost ever made when he was at Nebraska.
The biggest mistake Scott Frost made
in year one, his
was
biggest
taking his
mistake
foot
he
off
ever
the gas
made at Nebraska was starting a great quarterback in Adrian Martinez, but then leaving him out there against Colorado. He left him out there to show his stuff, and Colorado went on to injure Adrian Martinez and changed the trajectory of Scott Frost's future at Nebraska, because Adrian Martinez, when he got healthy again, was a different player.
That is false there, Jay. So that team still would have won 4 games with a healthy Martinez. Here's what I'm telling you. This
Martinez
team
was a different quarterback when he started
it.
as a freshman. When he came out there his freshman year and started game 1, game 2, he got hurt.
They won 4 games, Jay Saul. They started the first 6 games on a losing streak.
They had no backup behind Adrian Martinez. When Adrian Martinez was out there before he got hurt, he looked to run. He looked to use his legs. When he came back from injury, he was a timid player because of Scott Frost and not benching guys. When you get up in a big lead, you need guys for the future. It's a long season.
It's a long season, and it gets even longer if you lose week 1. That's why he's staying out there. We're blowing those guys out, and we'll figure it out the next week if an injury happens, because ultimately, if you're going to get injured against the small guys at UTEP, then you're definitely going to get injured when you go to Ohio State and you got the actual NFL talent guys hitting you.
Well, I would disagree. Hopefully it's a blowout game, and I think it just as important to rest him to avoid an injury. Even more important is to give other players some reps when you have the opportunity. So if you do have to put someone in down the road, it's not their first time on the field.
Well, if Harburg comes onto the field, Tissot might think this game is a loss.
I might think the season's a loss if Harburg comes out on the field.
I think he's a pretty good quarterback too, but
I agree. I think he's a great quarterback. And in the spring game, we saw a lot of jumps forward for the kid.
Yeah, Jay Saul, you got to remember that spring ball. I mean, come on. It doesn't mean much. We've seen these guys light up the scoreboard in spring ball the last few years, and they haven't done it in the season. And Harburg, he might be a good quarterback for the opposing team, not necessarily for our Cornhuskers.
Actually, for last season, he had the most wins on the Cornhuskers at quarterback starting games. I just want to point that one out there for you, T-So.
Is that why you were calling for his head every week, saying that this guy can't hit the broad side of a barn the way
it wasn't just his head I was calling for. I believe Matt Rule was also. I was on the train to fire Matt Rule until he got Raiola, and baby, we are back again. And how's my stat man doing, B-So? You find it? I believe they were ranked number 8.
He's having a hard time keeping up with all the stuff you're spewing.
Now let's move on to the game you really wanted my input on, game 2. And
Colorado, baby.
And this is why you just showcase both the guys a little bit in game 1 and let Colorado know right away. It doesn't matter who we put out there.
His defense.
Go ahead.
It was number 8. They were number 8, were they not?
In total defense in 2021, Nebraska finished ranked 47.
Yep.
In total yards per game given up, they gave up a line across at 5.3 yards per play.
It's terrible.
Last year's defense finished ranked 11th.
No. That's not what we wanted to know. That's not what we wanted to know. Points per game in 2021, B-So. Points per game
was even worse.
I'm giving you that. So they finished giving up 303 yards per game last year with a yard per play of 4.6, and that ranked 11th. So the defense was better last year, T-So. I will tell you that when it mattered, they did crumble back in 2021, but that defense was a lot better than they're giving them credit for. So I will try and find the points per
I
game there for you
won't
next.
give him credit. And that's why Bill Bush needed to be shown the door as soon as everything changed. All the people scream for Bill Bush to stay because the defense was great. As Biesel just mentioned here, they were ranked 47th in the country. That's terrible.
Bill Bush,
Bo Pelini just rolled out of bed with those stats right there and whacked his head on the floor because his defense never ranked that low. Or sorry, high.
I'm sorry, I believe Bill Bush was there in 2022, not in 2021. So let's get that started. Second off, shout out Bill Bush, who does follow Biesel on Twitter here.
It's not going to be for long anymore.
I'm not the one saying he wants to welcome back.
You just got blocked.
All right, but
yes,
moving on to week 2 there for you, big dog. Yeah, this is the one we really wanted. The Huskers are hosting the arch nemesis of Colorado, who they had lost to last year on the road.
I think prime time's gonna have a terrible day in Lincoln. I think the Huskers roll, barring any unforeseen Colorado cheap shots like they've done in the past to take players out of the game. But if they're just going to play a football game and no real cheap shots to injure players, I think Nebraska will roll. I don't think Colorado's that good. I think last year I think was a fluke. Nebraska was in the game until a couple big plays went against them, and then they just collapsed.
See, and Nebraska was in the game even at halftime after giving Colorado 4 extra possessions. So I agree with you. I think this is going to be a blowout, and dare I say, a steamroll.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, steamrolling. Big dog, I'm with you. I think there's definitely gonna be cheap shots, and I think there's gonna be cheap shots both ways because you know what I see? I see Nebraska watching ESPN, watching the news, hearing all about Colorado all season last year, especially after we lost to them and all off season, and listening to the So picture this. Ty Robinson is going to get that revenge for us. Him and Nash, because if you recall that Iowa game, Ty Robinson knocked out the Iowa quarterback for the game. I totally picture him doing that to Shadir in this game, to where Shadir goes in banged up at halftime, maybe comes in with his arm in a sling, and then that's the whole narrative about how Nebraska took cheap shots at our players.
Now, Tiso, wasn't it you? I don't remember if it was last year or the year before, who said Ty Robinson, I believe it was one-star Ty, cost us the game, knocking out 1,800-year-old Tanner Morgan.
I believe that was you, Biesel. I did not say that about Ty.
I believe you said one-star Ty, all he did was show up for one play, injured 45-year-old Tanner Morgan, and their backup came in and shredded us in the second half. So
that wasn't the only backup to shred us. I believe Illinois' third string shredded us in week 1 of that season.
And Iowa's backup guy shredded us last year after he did it too. What's your point here, Biesel?
I'm just trying to figure out why you think
depressing me here. Let's get on a positive note on this season.
Yeah,
I don't even remember those.
Big Dog needs the beer.
I don't remember those losses. I think you mentioned that earlier.
Well, here's what I picture. I picture Ty Robinson coming in hot, laying a lick, and then after Colorado loses and gets, their face wiped to the floor, Deion's going to be crying about it for the next week about how Nebraska did this, that kid should be suspended, should never play again. It's coming. I'm telling you this because Ty Robinson lives for the big moments and the big hits.
Nope. Let me tell you something else. This is going to be a true story to how the season is going to go for the Huskers. This game, week 2 at home against Colorado. Colorado has a full new roster up front in front of Shadir Sanders blocking right there. They got all these transfers coming in. It is going to be a big picture to if the Huskers can go in there and if they can get in his face. If they can't get in his face on Colorado's offensive line, we got major issues when it comes to the end of the season where we got a full bruiser schedule of big O linemen in the Big Ten.
Well, Jay, so you're forgetting that we had the #1 rush defense in all of college football last year.
Well, let me just say real quick on this game, with the exception of Nebraska being in the Big Ten, this is going to seem like old times for Colorado with Nebraska kicking their butt in the Big 12. Colorado's going back to the Big 12, and it's going to be like the good old days when Nebraska just roll them.
So Big Dog,
Totally
after you
agree.
got them 2-0. 2-0 for the Huskers. We haven't seen that one in about 7 years. I believe Mike Riley was the coach the last time we saw a 2-0 start here for the Huskers. We got another
And
night
back
game
in those
following up.
days, B-Cell was putting sprinkles on everything in the morning.
I believe the last quarterback to start 2-0 there for you as well, Jason, was T-Cell's favorite quarterback of the last 15 years. Good old Tanner, drafted in the 2nd round, Lee.
Actually, I don't think it was him. I believe it was Armstrong, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe Tanner Lee started 2-0 there as well, Jason.
I think
don't
Armstrong led him.
Tanner Lee ever won 2 games for
No,
us.
I do not believe so either. I believe Armstrong led the Huskers to the 7-0 start when they had to take on Ohio State at home when they were 7-0, which we are going to be picturing this again. Ohio State versus Nebraska, this time on the road, 7-0. Huskers could bring them back, and this could
Jay,
be
so
on
you don't
College
have a
Game Day.
7-0 going into Ohio State.
I said could be, doesn't mean I'm predicting
You
it.
have us
But we got
as a 500 ball club, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. We have to hear Big Dog's picks first.
all right, we got another night game in Memorial Stadium following the Colorado game. Boys are going to be on a high, according to Big Dog's predictions here. And we got University of Northern Iowa coming into town. This is a school that Scott Frost loved recruiting from.
Yes. Well, they may not roll them like they rolled UTEP. It's still a big Nebraska win. They might have a little bit of a letdown after the big win over Colorado. But I have them going 3-0. Northern Iowa's not going to be able to hang with them.
No, I don't think so either.
Not unless they bring
Steamroll.
back their old quarterback.
I do not believe that Northern Iowa stands a chance in this game either. I believe we have everyone that has come on the panel has the Huskers beating Northern Iowa. Then that brings us in. And so you could get us here. We're, a fourth of the way through the season at this point through Big Dog's predictions. What's everyone else that's been on the Scoop's predictions at this point?
So, Big Dog, for you to just kind of get lined up here, everybody thinks the Huskers are going to start 3-0. This is the first game number 4 of the season. Illinois comes to town to Memorial Stadium. There's one person who thinks this is a loss. That same person does have the Illini in his Big Ten championship game as well, and that's Jay Sull. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Jay Sull. Why do you think Big Brett is going to be able to take the Illini?
Whoa,
Big Ten
whoa.
game?
I thought you were talking about somebody else because I never once said that Illinois was going to be in the Big Ten championship game. Now, do I think they're going to take
the Big
on
Ten championship?
I thought we were talking about somebody else there for a second there, B-Sol. I did know that I picked the Illinois Fighting Illini to take down the Huskers. This is another night game. This will be the 3rd night game in a row. I think the Huskers are at 3-0, are flying a little high. I think the offensive line is going to be the first offensive line that the Huskers really take on during the season. And I think it's going to be a true test to the rushing game. And I think the Huskers have just had a tough go with Brett Bielema as the opponent's coach.
What's their record against Bielema? How long's he been there?
Well, not just there. We're talking about old-time Wisconsin as well.
Oh, well, it's a different team. It's different if you're telling me Wisconsin's trotting out there week 4. This is Illinois. I know they got a decent running back, but I think T-Cell mentioned the Huskers they had the top rush defense, or one of them.
I believe
The
the
top
Huskers, by the
for
way, are
yards.
1-4 against Bielema while he has been at Illinois.
And when's that last win? What's more recent, Jason? The win.
Wait a second, before we do that, what's Bielema's record against Matt Rule at Nebraska? I'm not counting the Scott Frost.
Or the Mr. Sprinkle guy.
Yeah, so what was his record against Rule versus Bielema, Nebraska and Illinois? What's
Matt
their
Rule
record?
is up 1-0. I do know where you're
Okay.
going with this.
Okay. Gonna be up 2-0. And they're gonna
Do
be
you
ready to
do
ship
do you
Bielema
dare
out.
say steamroll?
It very well could be. I mean, I will give J-Cell some propers. I think 3-night games, 3 weeks in a row could be tough. And it's a shorter week because they moved this game to Friday night, but they're still at home. So Illinois got to travel for that short week.
And I believe it's Chazzy who gave J-Sol no props on this one, because I believe Chazzy came out and said he expects Illinois to be the worst team in the Big Ten this year.
That is not the only person that said that on the panel. I believe you said this, T-Saw.
I said Minnesota.
I will put out there that Chazzy did not say Illinois would be the worst team in the Big Ten. Chazzy agreed with me with Purdue, but that's for a later point in the show here. So Big Dog's got the Huskers taking down the Illini here. T-Cell, I do want to point out here, while you were talking about it, I do think it's important for you to realize that the only coach with a losing record against Illinois here for the Huskers was none other than your offensive guru, Scott Frost. Every other coach has had success here. Doesn't matter if it's Bielema, doesn't matter if it's Lovie Smith, doesn't matter if it's Joe Schmo from the bar down at the street corner. The Huskers are going to steamroll Illinois here, J-Cell. I'm putting it out there. It's not going to be close. It's going to be a 3-3 touchdown game, and you're going to eat your first loss of the season here.
You know what? I sure hope I am. But I do want to say that the Huskers have always found a way to lose a game, and that is what I've seen for the past 5 years. So if I'm going off of a 5-year stat, we are 1-4
regime,
against
doesn't
them.
matter. Don't care.
I
about
agree.
Scott
I agree.
Frost.
However, I don't agree enough. The Huskers, I believe, are going to find a way to lose this game. 3-night games in a row. They're playing a first Big Ten opponent. This is going to be a different style of football, and I believe whoever gets the lead here early is going to hold the ball, hold the clock, and win the game.
I believe the difference is going to be at home. Nebraska's not going to lose to them at home.
I think they're just going to rock them to sleep. I don't think it's going to be that. I don't think it's going to be out of reach, but I don't think you're going to feel like Illinois is ever fully in the game to where it's like 21-7 and Nebraska jumps up 14-0 in the first quarter and Illinois just never seems to be in it after that.
You know, the only games Illinois beat Nebraska's gifted them, 2 or 3 touchdowns easy, or they got called on late hits that end up setting up touchdowns.
And those teams weren't just blowing it to Illinois, they were blowing it to everybody.
Yes, but Matt Rule's got more discipline on his guys. They're not just going to give games away.
I would tend to agree with you there, Big Dog.
Except that we saw the entire last season there, Big Dog. And that is why we are not going to agree with you there. The Huskers have always, for the past 5-7 years, since Mike Riley, since Bo Pelini left, the Huskers have always found a way to lose a game. Lose it. They could be winning in the fourth quarter, and they would find a way to lose it. Now, against an Illinois team, I think the way to lose that game is early on in the game, because Illinois is one that is going to be holding on to the football. They're a Minnesota style, an Iowa style. They're not going to try to give you the football back.
Doesn't matter.
Now,
they can try and hold on to the ball. Nebraska is going to beat them to death here. This isn't going to be close. They're not going to be able to run the ball to run the clock. Dylan Raiola is going to throw 3 touchdowns to Jalen Lloyd in the first quarter, and it's not going to be close.
Hot
Nebraska
take.
have 5 snaps.
Do you dare say steamroll?
Steamroll. Listen, J-Cell, here's an important fact for you to know. I get that as of late, Illinois has kind of had our number, but they had Scott Frost's number. In 11 games in the Big Ten, they have won 4 games. I will let you know that 3 of their 4 wins were against Scott Frost-led teams. That right there tells you the whole story. The other one was against Mike Riley, his first year at the helm, and that was the year that Tommy Armstrong dropped back to pass, had a game-winning touchdown, and decided to take a sack at the end of the game.
Well, Bissell, we are reminiscing here. However, what you did say was that Illinois was leading the pack there for the past 5 years, which I have been saying. I am not hopping on board yet. I haven't seen the Huskers start 4-0 since we saw a Mike Riley team start 7-0. I believe there is a slip up coming, and I picked it against Illinois with the cupcake row coming for the Huskers here going forward.
You know,
Well,
you sound
fasten
pretty
your-
awful high and mighty on your I picked the slip up here. You picked 6 slip ups.
Yes. Well, Jay Sell, just buckle up your seatbelt this year because the Huskers are for surely going 4-0.
Now, Big Dog, the next question here. Do you happen to agree with everybody else on game 5 except for J-Cell again? J-Cell has who I feel is going to be the worst team in the Big Ten, upsetting the Huskers when Nebraska leaves to go on their first road game of the season. J-Cell has Purdue beating Nebraska, who I think Purdue will probably end the season with maybe 1 win in total. J-Cell happens to think it's going to be this game.
Yes, I have that down as another Nebraska win. It will be tough. It's their first road game after playing four straight home games, but Purdue's not the same team they've been. So that train's
really
going to be quiet.
Yeah, can you really call that a road game? That's like going to Evanston. That's like going to Indiana, which we'll get to in a little bit here. There's going to be a sea of red there. It's going to be more red than black and gold there. It's going to feel like a 5th straight home game.
However, the last time the Huskers visited West Lafayette, Indiana, the Huskers dropped that game. It was a night game, and there wasn't as much red as you would think there would be. So, and I think after going 3 night games in a row, if the Huskers are 4-0, it is going to be a CA red. But if they are 3-1, better buckle up there. I think there could be a lot of empty seats.
Yes. Well, I don't think Purdue doesn't have their quarterback they had for like 6 years anymore. Didn't he move on?
Yes, that would be Mr. Aiden O'Connell, who is the quarterback of the Las Vegas Raiders now.
Yes.
And their head coach left last year, Jeff Brom. He is now the head coach at Louisville for his 2nd year there. This Purdue team is terrible. They've got one little spastastic running back in Devin Maccabee, who T-Cell thought was going to have 65 touchdowns last year, and he ended
if he didn't get injured.
Oh, that's right. Would have gone from 2 to 65.
But yeah, their new head coach there, Big Dog, is something Walters, and the guy's not going to make it probably at the end of the season. I see him getting fired after 1.5 to maybe they let him finish the year. I don't see him making
1.5 games?
Seasons, sorry.
Oh,
I see him getting fired halfway through the season.
I also believe this Purdue head coach, wasn't he, and I could be wrong, but I believe he's a former Colorado player.
If memory
serves me correct. And I believe he last year was ragging on Nebraska, saying how much he hates Nebraska and all of this. All it is bulletin board material to get the kids ready to play.
All I know there, B-Soul, is I don't pay attention to 4-8 squads, baby. We were 5-7 last year. Who cares about Colorado or their ex-players? Not me. And I do want to say that I think that this is going to be a tough one. First road game for the Huskers. I think they drop it, like has been said.
Well, think about where Purdue's coming from and how they feel about their coach, because Brom took them to the Big Ten championship after winning the Big Ten West. And this Walter guy took over the team last year and missed playing in a bowl game. So he took a team that played in the Big Ten championship to losing enough games to miss a bowl game and finish last in the Big Ten West.
When he got a whole new roster. I mean, you're looking at a whole new roster.
You took over a team that was in the Big Ten championship. You shouldn't be finishing last in the league the very next season.
Brom took his whole staff. He took his whole players. He took everything to That does matter.
No, it doesn't. Your team was just in the Big Ten championship. How do you go from the Big Ten championship to dead last in the division?
T-Salt, that's pretty simple. Jeff Brom got out of there because Purdue is a dumpster fire, and everybody knows it. There was no reason to stick around. That's why he went back to his alma mater in Louisville. And yes,
he took him to 10 wins.
Ryan Walters was a former Colorado Buffalo safety back from 04 to 08. And he has been on the record saying how much he hates Nebraska. Purdue's not going to touch us in this game, Joe. It is going to be a steamroll again. Huskers are going to be 5-0.
Biesel's got us ranked in the top 5 at this point.
Hey, I don't know that we're going to be ranked top 5 because they're going to look
if we're steamrolling everyone, you're claiming we're steamrolling. We're in the top 5 here, buddy.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Just hear me out. You're 5-0, and you're going to be ranked in the top 5 because you beat a UTEP team.
All by 50 points.
A Colorado team that's going to have, maybe 2 wins on the season. A Northern Illinois team or a Northern Iowa team. An Illinois team that's probably going to have 3 wins. A Purdue team that's going to have 1 win.
Yes, Biesel. If they start
wins are wins, but you're saying we're steamrolling these guys. If we're steamrolling everyone on our roster, you better believe we're going to be in the top 5. People are going to take notice.
Pause. Wins are wins, Biesel. We've been hurting to get some wins. So yes, if the Huskers start 5-0, you better believe they're in the top 15.
I would give you top 20 there. I'm not giving you top 5.
Steamrolls, though, every win a steamroll.
I never said top 5. I said top 15.
15. You said top 15. T, on the other hand, has said that we will be a top 5 squad for blowing out a Purdue squad that will end with maybe 1 win and firing a terrible Colorado player who has found his way into a head coaching job.
Well, if they do
not even teams like Ohio State blow out everybody.
Well, they don't have Dylan Raiola at quarterback there, T-Cell. They don't have Tony White running their defense.
Exactly.
Now, Big Dog, as you agree with a majority of the panel, except for little I like to be 500 J-Cell over here, how do you feel about the Rutgers?
Hold up. I wish to be 500. I wish to be 500. I wish to be 500.
Well, I
have you ever wished that?
5-0 and going 6-0 when they play Rutgers.
Dare I say, let's just skip our next trip to Indiana and call it 7-0?
You betcha.
I knew I could count on Big Dog. He's got that big cup of roulade there for everybody listening. He is drinking it. He is living in it. He is loving it. 7-0, game day at the Horseshoe, undefeated Nebraska taking on an Ohio State team with 1 loss at that point.
That one, I don't think they fare as well. I have Nebraska. I have that being their first loss. Unfortunately, the Indiana game will be tough at Indiana. I still think they'll win, but going to Ohio State, I just think Ohio State's got too much talent and too much depth. Plus playing, at Ohio State, I think is too much.
Indiana will be the worst team in the Big Ten this year. I do not think the Huskers will have any trouble there with Indiana. However, I do have to agree with you there. At Ohio State is going to be tough in the Horseshoe.
Now, Big Dog.
I think it's important to mention here, J-Cell, while you think Indiana will be the worst team in the Big Ten, somebody who is currently on this episode of The Scoop seems to recall, if I'm looking at my schedule predictions here, picked an upset as a trap game. They have the Huskers getting upset going to Indiana and then turning around and upsetting Ohio State, who is going to be sleeping on the Huskers after they get, dare I say, steamrolled in Indiana.
Okay, listen to this, Big Dog. Picture this, okay? After beating Rutgers, Huskers are 6-0. We just clinched a bowl game. This team's going to be celebrating all week. They're going to come in on the road against Indiana hungover. That's just the facts. Nobody on our team's ever played a bowl game unless it's been somewhere else. They don't know how to act. That's what you call right there a trap game for us. It's a road game. It's a weak opponent. You think you can look past them, and you can't. I think best case scenario, it's a dogfight and we pull it out. But I think that's a tough game either way. And then when you play your tough game, trap game, or potential loss at Indiana, Ohio State is now looking right past you because you're sandwiched in between their game against Oregon. They go to Oregon, come home for Nebraska, and then go on the road to Penn State. You're sandwiched there. And as soon as you play a close game or lose to Indiana, they're looking right past you to Penn State. And that's when you smack them in the lip because Ryan Day isn't that great of a coach.
Yes, I don't, I don't see Indiana capable of pulling off a trap game. It's set up to be a trap game, but it's Indiana. That's like when Nebraska was in the Big 12, it's like Kansas. Is that a trap game? No, they were a doormat to them all the time. I think Ohio State could look past Nebraska, but I think they would recover before the game's over. I just don't think Nebraska can hang with them in that game.
Well, again, I'm calling it. It's at least a dogfight in the horseshoe. I think the Huskers give it their all, and the game's going to be decided in the fourth quarter.
Oh,
that's not what you're calling it. You're calling it a win. You're not calling it a dogfight.
I'm calling it. I'm saying worst case scenario for the Huskers is a dogfight. Worst case scenario, it's a dogfight, and Ohio State wins it in the fourth quarter.
Now, T-Cell, I would say it's probably going to be a dogfight here anyway, but I did pick that as a loss there with Big Dog. I'm not living on cloud nine like you and our good buddy B-Schneid, who seem to think the Huskers are going to win in the horseshoe.
Now, B-Cell, let me ask you this. Why do you think that Ohio State is this unbeatable, undeniable superpower? What have they done with Ryan Day? You're thinking of the Urban Meyer years. The Urban Meyer years, I'd be like, hey, I'll take a knee.
You're darn right you would. You're darn right you would.
Ryan Day hasn't done anything at Ohio State.
Listen, nobody here is sitting here and telling you that Ryan Day is the reason that this team is going to be good. It is the rest of the talent on this Ohio State team.
What talent?
They just churned out like 6 guys to be drafted in the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft and replaced them with other prospects who are going to go in the same way.
Can you even pronounce who their quarterback is right now? Do you even know who their quarterback is, Bissell?
Believe it's Will Howard.
Believe. You believe it's Will Howard.
Because
and is this Will Howard as high a ranked recruit as Raiola? No, he's not.
Now,
do they have a Marvin Harrison Jr. running out there? No, they don't.
Now, let's just look at it this way, because originally, before Raiola committed, let's go back to that headspace that we were all in. We were willing to take the guy that Ohio State said, get the hell out of here, and Kyle McCord, so that they could replace him with Will Howard, who took Adrian Martinez's starting job at Kansas State.
I also want to point out he wasn't the only guy Ohio State said goodbye to that we would have taken. And Urban, baby, if this doesn't work out with Matt Rule, we still want you.
They also said goodbye to Joe Burrow there, Bissell, so they're not exactly making all the right decisions over there.
And the Huskers didn't take Joe Burrow there either there for you, T-Cell.
Exactly.
T-Cell, I also think Joe Burrow really is, first off, great quarterback, good talent. I'm not taking anything away from him. But went from a very talented Ohio State team where he was buried by depth at the quarterback position, and the guys in front of him are in the NFL as well, and went to an LSU school who had probably the best receiving core I've ever heard of.
Ohio State wasn't far behind him.
No, but
they were behind him.
Yes,
they were behind him, but not by far. And he wasn't made by these receivers. You might, it was a team in a process in general.
Yes, he was made by those receivers. He had Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase.
Well, now you could have a debate. Who's better in the NFL? Is it Jefferson or Burrow? Because, Burrow's been fantastic in the NFL.
Burrow has Jamar Chase on the field with him. Justin Jefferson had Kirk Cousins throwing to him.
For half a season.
Yeah. And Burrow also played in the Super Bowl.
And how did that fare out for him?
They almost pulled it off. Point being, though, he's a damn good quarterback, and he was better than every quarterback on Ohio State's roster. You're going to sit here and tell me that Justin Fields was better than him?
So you're telling me Joe Burrow's on the Chicago Bears. You think he's leading them to the Super Bowl?
I'm not saying Super Bowl. The Bears don't have that great of a roster, but I'm telling you, he would have done better than Justin Fields.
You just made that argument because Joe Burrow was in the Super Bowl and Justin Jefferson hasn't been to the Super Bowl. But as soon as I flip the switch to if you put him on the other team, you put him on the Bears.
Because you forget that you're now.
All of a sudden, I never said he was going to the Super Bowl. What are you changing your words here for?
If you go to the Super Bowl, it's a team thing, and you're trying to pick apart the Bears, who have probably one of the worst managed teams in all the NFL.
Okay.
They're down there with the Cleveland Browns.
You just said that Joe Burrow is a better quarterback than Justin Fields.
He is.
But hold on.
Fields isn't even going to play on the Steelers.
You said it's a team game and that Justin Fields can't be blamed for the Chicago Bears debacle because they're a horrible
Yes, he can.
team. Okay, then put Joe Burrow there. Do they make a Super Bowl?
No, but they probably make the playoffs.
I seriously doubt they make the playoffs because that team is a dumpster fire. I'm telling you right now, if Justin Fields had been drafted to the Cincinnati Bengals instead of Joe Burrow, it would have been a very similar outlook.
So you're saying if Justin Fields was on the Cincinnati Bengals, the Bengals still would have played at the Super Bowl and still would have beat Patrick Mahomes head-to-head. Justin Fields, the guy who doesn't know how to throw a football.
That Cincinnati Bengals team lived on their defense and a couple good shots from the quarterback.
And Justin Fields can't make a shot. So
Justin Fields
has no time behind that offensive line.
Correct.
You could give him time. He's still going to miss the throw.
He also had 0 receiving core. Joe Burrow's out here with Jamar Chase.
That's what you keep saying. The Bears have good receivers too. T. Higgins is nothing special.
Who are the good receivers on the Bears that they had the same year that Joe Burrow made the Super Bowl? If you were to put that team there and switch the receivers out, who would have been the good receivers to help Joe Burrow make it there?
What do you want me to sit here and Google? Mooney? I don't have the whole Bears roster memorized here, B-Sol.
I'm sorry, Darnell Mooney?
B-Sol, I don't have the Bears roster memorized.
Because there's nobody on the team there that would have been worth anything on another team.
I'll sit here and say Chase is worth nothing without Burrow. I think if you get rid of Chase, Burrow's still going to be good. If you get rid of Chase, what's he going to do?
Still a top 5 receiver in the league.
He ain't top 5 now.
Dumbest take I've ever heard.
He ain't top 5 now, and he definitely won't be top 5 without Burrow. Unless you give him Mahomes, then sure, yeah, he'll be top 5.
So you're arguing that Joe Burrow is the second best quarterback in the league?
I'm saying he's definitely in the top 5.
No, that's not what you just said. You said he's number 1. So then let me ask you this. You put Patrick Mahomes on the Bears. Are they a contender?
Anybody with Patrick Mahomes is a contender there, J-Saul.
But you're saying putting Joe Burrow on the Bears, they're still not a contender.
I told you they'd be in the playoffs. Joe Burrow is not Patrick Mahomes. Don't get that confused over here.
And he isn't that worldly either. He's got a better offense and a better system around him there in Cincinnati than Justin Fields was given. And therefore, Justin Fields was a better quarterback in college. Justin Fields had a better quarterback, a better outstanding play in college when he was with Ohio State. Now, listen to me. At LSU, Joe Burrow was gifted an offense. If you go watch him, he looked like the Ohio State quarterback who played 3 games, can't even think of his name, that threw the ball deep and just caught the receivers downfield. That is all Joe Burrow did.
Well, Jason, I'm just going to have to agree to disagree with you here because I think Justin Fields took advantage of being in a weak Big Ten conference and having all the best athletes on his team. I mean, Ohio State's roster at that point was better than everyone in the Big Ten.
LSU had the best athletes in the league. They had the best athletes in college football.
And that's why before Burrow was there, LSU was garbage, right?
I don't believe that Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase were starting at that point there.
Well, then that's on the coaching staff.
I mean, you're saying it comes down to the quarterback until you're looking at the top 2 receivers taken off the board in the draft.
I'm just saying, Jay Saul, that Ohio State didn't exactly have slouches on their team either.
Not saying they had slouches, but I'm saying he was gifted a win in a program there at LSU.
All right, guys, enough of this LSU Ohio State discussion. Nobody really cares. Nobody's cared since 2007 when Jim Tressel took Ohio State down and they lost to Matt Flynn and LSU. Let's get back on topic here. Big Dog, we've got you through 8 games. You've got the Huskers 7-1. Next game after Ohio State, UCLA comes to town. They're out of coach. Chip Kelly left. He's now part of that Ohio State coaching staff. How do you feel UCLA fares come into Lincoln?
I think they go down. I think Nebraska moves on to 8-1. A lot of people, I'm sure, pick UCLA coming to Lincoln. It would be a different story if Nebraska had to travel out to California. Them coming to Lincoln after a tough loss to Ohio State, I think Nebraska rebounds and knocks off UCLA.
Now, it is interesting you say that because J-Cell and T-Cell both have this UCLA game picked as a loss. And I just don't understand it. UCLA is the worst of the 4 teams coming in from the Pac-12 joining the Big Ten. And this is an easy win for the Huskers.
Well, B-Saul, I picked it this way because when I was on campus there as a student, I watched UCLA beat us at home and then also on the road. And it was disappointing because we had Bo Pelini at that point. We were a better team than UCLA, and they happened to beat us both on the road and at home the following season. So that's why I picked it that way. And also, after beating Ohio State, I again think our inexperienced team, not used to winning these types of games, is celebrating through the streets, whatever, and we're playing hungover when UCLA comes into town.
Now, Bissell, I know I only picked 6 wins on the season. However, this was one of my wins, as this would get the Huskers bowl eligible. I don't know why you're coming up here saying that I'm picking a loss against everyone. This is UCLA we're talking about. This is a team. No, I picked it as a win.
No, you did not, Jason.
Yes, I did, because Chip Kelly is out of the picture. Chip Kelly is now with Ohio State.
Kelly is out of the picture.
You said this team would be better without Chip Kelly. Yes. Was your wording as you picked it as a loss.
Now, Jason, let's just go through here because you have the Huskers starting 3-0, correct? There's 3 wins.
Yes, and then they drop the next 2.
They drop,
and then they pick up the next 2, and they're one short. And I didn't have them beating Iowa.
You did. You had them finishing the season to get to 6-6 by beating Iowa.
Yeah,
well, you got to go back to the tape. That is not what I had. I had them drop in the last 3 of the season.
No, you did not.
4 in a row and beating Iowa at the end. Now, either way, I don't think they're going to lose 4 out of the last 5 games anyway, but that's just my opinion.
Well, I just want you to know that I picked that as a win for the Huskers against UCLA at home.
Now, would you like me to adjust it so that you have a UCLA win and an Iowa loss?
Yes. And that wouldn't be an adjustment. That would be a correction.
And so that then pushes your Iowa team into the Big Ten championship. Is that correct?
I never picked Iowa to go to the Big Ten championship game, but I am following suit. But it is interesting that Big Dog said that this comes down to UCLA having to travel from California to Lincoln, Nebraska. And that brings us into the following week when the Huskers have to travel all the way to Southern California.
Yes, and I have that as their second loss. I have Nebraska going to USC and losing. I think that the travel after a big win at home against UCLA, traveling out west, I think is going to catch up to them, and they're going to get beat for their second loss.
I would agree with you there, Big Dog. I don't know that this USC team's as talented as they have been in years past, but I do think going on the road, chances are the Huskers are going to be, again, battle tested at this point, but it's really their 4th road game, but it's really their 2nd true road game at this point.
Well, Big Dog, I am actually on the other side of it. I think Nebraska travels to USC and beats them with no crowd in their stadium because USC can't get a crowd. If anyone goes to their games, it's the away team. And here's why. I think USC at this point in the season is going to be deflated completely. They're fighting at this point for 6 wins, and I don't see them getting 6 wins. I think if they're lucky, they'll get 6 wins, maybe the next week against UCLA, because I don't see it happening. They got to play LSU this season, Michigan, Wisconsin, Penn State, Washington, Nebraska, UCLA, Notre Dame. I don't see 6 wins out of that personally.
He just casually threw in a 5-7 team there with a couple contenders going for a national championship and the rest playing for the playoffs.
Which one?
You just casually threw Nebraska into a list with all these other teams that are ranked and fighting for the playoffs.
Wisconsin is not ranked and fighting for the playoffs there, Jay. So I'm just saying they're going to get beat up on this tough season because playing all these big programs takes a toll on you.
Now, speaking of Wisconsin, Big Dog, that is the next game up on the list. The Badgers come to Lincoln after a loss to USC. How do you feel the Huskers fare in this one?
I think they rebound again. I'm not sold on Fickle being a good coach anyway. Nebraska should have had it last year. That's one team they've found a way to give away the game when they played them, is with Wisconsin. But I don't think that's going to continue under Matt Rule. I think Wisconsin comes to Lincoln and Nebraska beats them. It'll be a close game, but that goes the Huskers' way.
Totally agree.
I would love to see it. And just for everybody here on the panel, shout out Luke Fickell, because he is the reason that Urban Meyer even got a job at Ohio State when he brought the Buckeyes to Lincoln his first year. And Levante David changed that game on its head and gave Nebraska the biggest comeback ever. I agree with you. I don't think Luke Fickell is the best coach out there. I don't think he's a great coach either. He did lead the Bearcat bandwagon to the playoffs, but we all saw how that fared after they made it there.
Hold
now,
on. A shout out. Why are you giving him a shout out? I don't believe the Huskers have beaten Ohio State since then. And bring in Urban Meyer, who I would say is arguably one of the top coaches in all of college football in the new era of the 21st century. Why would we be giving him that?
B-Cell, I will give a shout out to him too. After that biggest comeback in Husker history, Fickell went down as one of my favorite opposing coaches. I wish he would have stuck around there for years. I welcome him back to the Big Ten because I see more of that in the future.
And just to add on to Big Dog's thing against B-Cell here, B-Cell's sitting here saying that he doesn't think Luke Fickell is that great of a coach, but yet he picked Luke Fickell to come into town with Wisconsin and beat us.
I did pick that game as a loss, T-Cell, just because Nebraska has handed Wisconsin a win in out of the last 10 years. It feels like every game. I believe we've beaten them twice in the last 10 years. And so it has nothing to do with Luke Fickell. It has more to do with the way Nebraska plays Wisconsin, that we have gift wrapped them games time and time again. I agree. And just so you know, Big Dog wasn't coming at me. He agreed with me that welcome Luke Fickell back. He's not that great a head coach. Nebraska has had his number in the past. They ran him out of town at Ohio State. We're the reason he got fired. And then he went to Cincinnati and had to basically start all over again, and then happened to get an opportunity here at Wisconsin. He's going to be run out in 2 years because Barry Alvarez is going to get tired of having to be questioned. Hey, Barry, how long until you step back down on the sidelines?
I'm just saying, B-Saw, you're coming out here saying you don't think this guy's a good coach, but then you have us losing to him. So you do think he's a good coach then? Or you think that we don't have a good coach?
A loss can happen not because of a head coach there, T-So. It can happen because a team self-destructs. You've got us losing to Indiana, so I don't want to hear anything out of you.
Touché.
And with Big Dog picking a win here, he could be going for second best record predicted for the panel of the Sully Scoop as we finish off the season at Iowa in a night game on Black Friday.
And it's another Husker win. It'll be tough in Iowa. Iowa will have a good defense. Not sure their offense is going to be much better. It'll probably be a little better than with Farron's his son coaching there, but I think Nebraska's defense will be pumped up. At that point, they will have, I believe, a definite shot to be in the Big Ten championship game. They should be on the line with only 2 losses. I think they'll win and finish off the regular season 10-2.
Now, Big Dog, I got to ask you a question here because I got to know. So with Nebraska beating Iowa, I take it you don't have Iowa making the Big Ten championship game, correct?
No, it's not going to be a rematch.
I wouldn't think so either. And I also wouldn't think that Iowa stands a prayer of a shot making that final game with there not being divisions now. But T-Cell, on the other hand, thinks this Iowa team's going to go 10-2 and make the championship game over, I don't know, an Oregon, an Ohio State, a Michigan.
Who have to play each other.
A Nebraska.
Again, you're another one out here comparing contenders with a 5-7 squad.
And
Okay,
so you're ripping on me.
Picks.
You're ripping on me. I have Iowa in the Big Ten championship, and I have them getting steamrolled by Penn State, missing out on the playoff. Meanwhile, this other guy on our panel, Jay Saul's got Iowa in his playoff.
No, I do not.
That is
You
incorrect.
just picked that last week, dude.
I did
what are you
not
talking
pick
about?
Iowa.
You said
hold on a
Iowa's in
second.
your playoff.
Iowa is in his playoff team.
That is in my
Yeah.
playoff team. I retract my statement. Iowa is in my playoff, but that is because they are a 12 seed.
I could give you a 12 seed that's better than Iowa. How about Liberty?
Liberty didn't even make it to a 12 seed there, B-Saw, and they were undefeated last year.
Oh man, I could pull a handful of teams that'll be better than this Iowa team. You just threw away one of your 12 teams in the playoffs.
So you picked your last team was a throwaway pick.
You picked
No.
Syracuse.
Yes, to win the ACC, baby.
And winning the ACC does not mean that you make the college football playoff. That is a precedent that has been set.
Unfortunately, I think if you win the ACC with 12 teams getting in, I think you're in. But we're getting
We
ahead of
thought
ourselves.
if you won the
We're-
ACC outright and were undefeated last year, you were in. However, that is not the case there,
Yes.
B-Saw. That is
Well,
not the case.
As long as nobody's picking one of the Pac-12 Big 2 teams to be in the playoffs, because that ain't gonna happen.
Somebody
You
did.
can't come out of a
Big dog.
2-team conference.
Well, big dog,
Somebody
let me
did.
tell you something. Put on your tinfoil hats because, listen, there is still a Power 5 out there, and everyone knows it. Everyone is still bummed that the Pac-12 has disrupted and dismantled. However, Washington State's hardest game this season is against Oregon State. And that is
Right.
at home for Washington State. This is going to be phenomenal. Washington State goes undefeated, runs the table, gets into the playoff.
Does
Or-
not matter. Does
or
not matter.
There is an
Does-
that does matter. You're telling
That
me we get
does
12
No,
not.
it
teams?
doesn't.
You can't even consider yourself a Power 5 conference if you don't have at least 5 teams in your conference. A Power 2, no way one of those makes it.
Those are the big dogs that got to eat there, big dog. And let me tell you,
They didn't even
Oregon
schedule Notre
State-
Dame. They
Oregon-
scheduled the Mountain West.
Oregon State takes
Hey,
on
T-Cell, what you got to
Oregon
understand
at
is
home.
a win is a win.
Oregon State takes on Oregon at home. One of the toughest places to play in all of college football is at Oregon State. If Oregon State is to knock off Oregon, look at how much of that win Washington State taking down Oregon State means. And that is why I have Washington State going undefeated. You can't leave out an undefeated with 12 teams. B-Cell
I
just
will
said
give
it
you-
himself.
I will give you, if they go in and beat Oregon and Oregon ends up the Big Ten champ, then they got a valid argument. But if Oregon is middle of the pack in the Big Ten, because they're not going to be winning it, I don't care what they do. You're not coming
Whoa.
out of a 2-team conference and
Whoa.
going to the playoff.
Hold on. Was that a hot take from Big Dog here that Oregon will not be winning the Big Ten?
I'm with
Yes,
Big Dog.
Put it down. Put it down.
I'm with them. Oregon ain't gonna do much in the Big Ten, especially
The-
not year one.
An
When they're
undefeated
when they're
Pac-2
traveling
gets
coast to coast all season, you're going to see that catch up to them quick.
An undefeated Pac-2 gets into the playoff.
Now, Big Dog, listen to
You know what?
Iowa's Big Ten schedule.
I will give you this. In that Pac-12, I do think an undefeated team would make it to their conference championship.
I would dare I say a 1-loss team or a 2-loss team. Hell, I'll give you a 5-loss team would make it to their championship game.
Yes, I agree. You could have an undefeated team and a team that doesn't win a game. They're in your championship game.
But Big Dog, here is Iowa's schedule in the Big Ten. And here's why Iowa could have a good record that shows that their record might be better than actually what the team is. Because they got Minnesota, who sucks. They got Ohio State, that's a tough game. They got Washington, who's going to be a shell of themselves. Michigan State, who sucks. Northwestern, who probably played above what they are last year. Wisconsin, who sucks. UCLA, who's going to suck. Maryland, who sucks. And then Nebraska. That's Iowa's Big Ten schedule.
Now,
And T-Sol, in this league, now, Big Dog, you got to listen to this. In this league of the Big Ten, the top 2 teams in the league, top 2, there's no sides. I'm not sure if this is even stuck with T-Sol yet. I'm really curious. He has Iowa going to the Big Ten championship game, being the number 2 or number 1 team in the Big Ten, losing the Big Ten championship game. Top 2 teams in the Big Ten.
But they won't be ranked that high.
And don't make the playoff.
Their record will show it, but they won't be ranked that high. People take into your strength of schedule. They won't have any top 10 wins, J-Saw.
T-Sol, an undefeated or a 1-loss team is what it's going to take to make to the Big Ten championship game. So if they're 1 loss or undefeated, they're going to be a top 10 team.
No, they won't take that.
Both of you, you
didn't look at their schedule.
Quick thing. If Big Dog, you made a point here. You said Oregon's going to get tired out going coast to coast. I just want to touch on this real quick, and then we're going to get your Big Ten championship game. Oregon's away games this year are Oregon State in their non-conference play. Then they're on the road at UCLA. Then they have a night game at Purdue, which is basically like playing.
That's a loss.
Normal time for them. Whatever, T-Cell. Then they go on the road to Michigan and on the road at Wisconsin. They have 4 away Big Ten games, and I would argue that 2 of them have the opportunity to really be scheduled against Oregon due to time-wise. But the fact that Purdue is penciled in as a 7 p.m. game already, that's basically playing at a normal time. It's not like it's an 11 a.m. game across country there for them. It's not like they're going to Rutgers playing at 11 a.m. and it's, a 4-hour time difference.
Yeah, I still think it's going to it's going to wear them out going coast, and that, they can't play Purdue every week.
I agree with you and understand that, but since you don't have Oregon winning the Big Ten, let's take a look at your Big Ten championship game. Who do you have in it, and who do you have winning?
Well, I haven't really looked it all over that well.
Sounds like a cop-out
10-2 Nebraska. You're telling me, if you're thinking the Big Ten team's going to be 1 loss or undefeated only, that would eliminate Nebraska from being in there. I do think Penn State is a likely suspect to be one of the teams. Of the rest, I would have to say not going to be Oregon. I'd probably have to go with, not knowing the schedule though, maybe Michigan and Penn State.
And who would you have winning the Big Ten out of those 2?
I would have Penn State.
Is this the year Penn
just
State
so you know,
finally gets it done?
Just so you know, B-Cell gave me a lot of flack over that pick.
I believe I gave you a lot of flack over picking Iowa to even.
And you gave me a
Big Ten
lot of flack over having Penn State in there winning the Big Ten too.
Yeah, you could have put Rutgers in there over Iowa, and I would have given you a hard time because Iowa's in it.
And that brings us to big dogs. Got us 10-2, big dog. Who are the playmakers for the Huskers on offense, or who is the playmaker on defense that you think is going to really shine this year and stand out to carry the Huskers to a 10-2 prediction that you have going?
I have a hard time not liking the polar bear. He can disrupt and take over a game on that line. I like Ty Robinson too, but I like Nash a little better. He would be my defensive player of the year for Nebraska, projected going in. On offense, I'd like to see Dylan Raiola up there, but my pick for top player, he's not going to be a point scorer, but the center, Ben Scott. I think if they have an offensive line that shows up and can produce, which is all going to be led by their center, I like their offense's chances.
Now,
I like that pick
Big
there,
Dog,
Big Dog, for you. Even though I did not pick Ben Scott or any offensive lineman, that is because I have seen what the offensive lineman has done in the past few years here for the Huskers, and previously since Bo Pelini has left. We really haven't had an offensive line. So I like that pick. I would love to see it. I just have seen the offensive line the past few years. That is why I went away from that pick, and I went with Dylan Raiola. But I do agree with you on Nash, Hutmacher, and the polar bear there. I think he's going to have a fantastic year. He cut a lot of weight. He's been doing wrestling. I think he's going to be a lot quicker this year.
Now, Big Dog, I really like the Ben Scott pick too. However, I do think when you go back and you look at the season, I think there's no way if Nebraska comes out and wins the amount of games that we're all thinking, it's all going to be tied back to Dylan Raiola stepping in, and he's going to take a lot of the credit for the success of this team. I like the Ben Scott pick. I think Ben Scott's our best offensive lineman. I said that in a very early episode of this season as well. Been saying that since last year. But I also think another guy that could get a lot of credit here is going to be Jalen Lloyd, who I think is going to set some Nebraska receiving records this year.
Is that a hot take there, Biso? I mean, what kind of records are you expecting him to break?
I would say strictly yardage to start.
You think he's going to be the number one receiving yardage guy in a single season ever, all time at Nebraska?
I could see that. Let me give you the exact total of yards.
You think he's going to pass Trey Palmer?
Hot take.
Yeah.
We're typing that in.
And if that happens,
already penciled in.
If that happens, it's due to Ben Scott's blocking ability and giving Dylan Raiola the extra time to throw the ball.
So that was Jalen Lloyd. So that's single season receiving record.
And I'm going to say there, B-Sol, I do not see that coming because we have such depth at the receiving room. They're going to be looking to switch guys in and out. And we also have big tight ends out there that are going to be running around the field. I don't believe that Jalen Lloyd is going to be getting all the targets. But I do want to say,
so
I'll put out a hot take. I'll put out a hot take there for you, B-Sol. I believe that Dylan Raiola is going to set a record for most yards completed as a quarterback as a freshman at Nebraska.
Oh, so you got a bunch of asterisks in there.
Hey, asterisks or not, that's a record, baby. That's an ESPN stat line for you. Most yards completed as a quarterback that is a freshman at Nebraska.
You know, Jay, so he's still got to chase Taylor Martinez on that. You forget Taylor Martinez had a pretty good rookie season
as a rushing quarterback. This is a different team there.
Got to chase Adrian Martinez as well.
Yep, and Tommy Armstrong. But I think you're lucky that Tommy, I think, only played like half the season as a freshman.
He did only play half the season there. Now, to just ask you guys this question here, because I don't think it's outrageous in a 12 game span. Do you really not think that Jalen Lloyd can get over 1,000 yards?
I think it's unlikely because typically when you have a really good quarterback, they spread the ball around to everybody. And it's less about depth and more about that quarterback being able to just hit who's ever open. So that's why I doubt it's going to be Lloyd. And I think it's just going to be everybody.
Jalen Lloyd is your deep threat that if he connects on 2 passes, you're talking 100 yards.
Yeah, but who's to say we're going to be attacking him deep? Why don't we just short yard him and hit the slant consistently or the
Jalen
tight
Lloyd's
end?
the guy who can take the slant and take it 80 yards for a touchdown.
He can't be everywhere.
He's everywhere.
I do think if the tight ends stay healthy, you could see one of them set a tight end record.
Hot take.
He hasn't locked in a certain tight end though.
But they got to stay healthy.
He's locking in the entire tight end room, and one of them has to come out with the record.
Right. And
I'll take the field there between Borkercher and Fedoni.
And don't forget Carter Nelson.
That's
don't
true.
forget Carter Nelson.
That's true.
But Big Dog, I gotta ask you, what are your thoughts on Jay Saul's hot take that Dabo Swinney will get fired this season from Clemson if Clemson is not ranked as a top 5 team in the country?
That is not what I said there, Big Dog. I said if they are not ranked in the top 5 in the ACC.
Which still could be top 5 in the country, depending on how the ACC is looking.
Well, no, I don't necessarily see Clemson as a top 5 team in the country. I think they should be a top 5 in the ACC. They should be at least one of the top 5 there, or I'm guessing their fan base is going to believe they are.
They finished 6th last year.
So if they are to finish 6th again there, Big Dog, or worse, I think Dabo is out the door at the end of the season.
Do you agree with that?
I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me though. If they finish 6th in the ACC or 6 or worse for 2 years in a row, it wouldn't surprise me because Clemson's been spoiled with success and expecting it. So it wouldn't shock me.
Well, here's the
Clemson
thing.
hasn't gone out and done anything in the recruiting base or on the transfer portal this season. So Dabo is really dug his heels in with the guys he's got that left him at 6th in the ACC last year. And not a single team in the ACC made the college football playoff. Let that one sink in there.
Well, here's my thing as to why, if that happens, everybody who let that happen at Clemson needs to get fired as well. Okay? Clemson was a nobody in college football. I mean, best case scenario, they were 6-6 or 7-5. Dabo comes in, builds them up. They compete and beat Alabama and become one of the top recruiting teams in the country. Best facilities in the country at that point in time. I think they got passed because, these things shuffle every year.
Well,
Clemson is still Clemson.
Yeah, Dabo didn't build that Clemson program. I mean, he took it to another level, but I think in like 82, they won a championship with the other coach because Dabo wasn't there at that time.
A whole lifetime ago.
Dabo's
I believe
won twice
in
at
82,
Clemson.
Dabo was probably playing for Alabama.
Dabo had just been born.
Dabo's won 2 at Clemson, and I believe he's played for 4 total. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Bissell. And he's been to the playoffs another time because I know Ohio State beat him, in the semifinals. I think the Clemson fans should be kissing Dabo's feet. I just don't like the idea of pushing out a coach who showed you this much success and you still compete in every game. You swindle down a little bit. Not everybody could be Saban and paying everybody to stay here forever and doing whatever he's doing in the background. Okay. Not everyone could do that, but it's not like Clemson's dropped and they're struggling with 4 wins. They're still winning 8 wins easy every year.
Yeah, I mean, he took over probably a mediocre Clemson program, but it's not like Clemson's never had a good program. That'd be like giving Saban credit for building an Alabama program. Alabama they had their down years, but they were a powerhouse for years. I mean, everybody forgets about the old time, but it's not like Saban went in and took over a college that doesn't follow and love its college football and took them from nowhere to the top. He certainly maintained it there, but the Bear Bryant had some awful good years there.
Exactly. And the thing is, Alabama would have never fired Saban. So why would Clemson even explore that?
I don't know why the exactly came out there, Tiso. I think he just went against everything you said.
When did I say that Saban came out and built Alabama? I mean,
You
Alabama has all the most championships.
You said Dabo built Clemson.
Now, Giselle,
Clemson in the modern era, okay? Because Clemson was a nobody in the modern era.
Just to put it out there, because T-Cell's beating around the bush and he just doesn't know how to look up and find information. Dabo Swinney took them to 6 consecutive college football playoffs. That tells you all you need to right there.
Exactly.
And when was the last one there, B-Cell?
It was in 2020.
Exactly.
But you're telling me from 2015 to 2020, he took you to 6 and you won 2 national championships.
Yep.
About the same
Alabama
as Ohio State.
era.
About the same as Ohio State, and you're saying that Ryan Day should be let go.
Ryan Day hasn't won a championship.
Hasn't done anything.
He hasn't won a championship.
Dabo won 2 titles, lost 2 titles, been to the playoffs 6 years in a row. And because of the way the transfer portal is, now mind you, Clemson is the only team in college football, I believe, that did not have a single transfer in during the portal this year. Dabo doesn't know how to recruit in the portal. That is where Clemson's issues are. It has nothing to do with Dabo Swinney not being a good head coach. The fact that he hasn't been able to adapt to the new recruiting ways.
Well, and Biesel, then you got to add on, like, if you dive in to the transfer portal, these teams that are winning the transfer portal, are they actually winning on the field? Because we know Colorado isn't.
Well, and the other thing is, now college is a little different than pros, but just because you win, it's not what did you do, it's what have you done for me recently. And look what I can't remember who was the Cowboys' old head coach that won all those Super Bowls, and they sent him packing.
Jimmy Johnson?
No, well before him, Landry.
Yeah, Tom Landry
should have been able to go out on his own terms, is what everybody thought, but nope, they came in and said, "Oh, sorry, we haven't won a Super Bowl in 3 years. You're gone."
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's the way it's been, because you think about those teams who've stepped in and won a championship, quick championship in college football, and they've been let go. You think about, Florida State did it with their coach. Auburn did it with theirs. That Cookie Monster guy with LSU, he got fired too.
And to tie it all back full circle here,
and just to go back full circle, the only reason I know that Dabo did not build that Clemson program is because Nebraska lost a national championship to him in 1982 down in the Orange Bowl. I was at the game, so it was a little disappointing. That's why I can remember it was long before Dabo. Clemson had a decent team,
and that was going to be my tie back, was that Nebraska lost to them in the national championship game. And then, unfortunately, Nebraska let Clemson beat their curse of getting back there with Jay Sell's Gator Bowl tinfoil hat moment. That
absolutely, we have to go back to the Gator Bowl
and
lose, and 4 years later we would be national champions. That is exactly what happened to Clemson. Boom. Beat them in the 2000 and I believe a 9 Gator Bowl, if I'm not mistaken there, B-Saul.
And I think
Let's-
Georgia took the same route, didn't they?
That is exactly it there, big dog. It wasn't just a fluke. It was a double dose. And when things happen twice, they're going to happen a third time. And you want to be on the right side next time. Clemson, we beat them 4 years later. Boom, national champs. We beat Georgia 2014, 4 years later. Boom, national champs. I'm just saying we might want to start looking at a Gator Bowl loss. But thanks for joining us for another episode of the Sully Scoop. You're here with Jason.
Esau.
And T-Cell.
And we want to give a special thanks for Big Dog for coming on and giving us his predictions for this year.
Thanks again. It was great to be back on. Looking forward to a big season. Obviously, I went out on the limb a little at 10-2, but I do think it's attainable with the talent they have this year and the coaching staff.
Well, we sure hope so. I'm not really sure that I predicted that. B-Sol didn't really write down my games correctly, as we found out today. However, don't forget to follow and like, and you can catch us on X/Twitter at Sully_Scoop, or catch our website, thesullyscoop.com. And check
Go
out all
Big
our
Red.
merch. And check out all our merch.
Go Big Red.